video presentation, which takes about 10 minutes. So we'll start with that, and then after that, we will have the panel respond to the launch and to the study. And then we will also invite one of their researchers, Pamela Combinido, who is here, to also join us and take questions. So some of you may have read this report already. Father Jet referenced this earlier. So the full title is Architects of Network Disinformation, Behind the Scenes of Troll Accounts and Fake News Production in the Philippines. Roll tape, please. Part of the new silent majority. Let's do that again. Let's do that again.
My name is Jonathan Ong. I'm Associate Professor in the University of Massachusetts, and this will be a joint video presentation between myself and Jason Cabanes, lecturer in the University of Leeds. Taking live questions will be Pamela Combinido of De La Salle University. So we regret not being there to physically attend the event, but we are nevertheless very much grateful for the organizers, including John Neri, for inviting us to this event and launch our report, Architects of Network Disinformation. So we look forward to the different questions and comments, particularly from our discussants in the ad and PR industry, but we also look forward to questions and comments from students, our fellow academics, and journalists in attendance today. So today we are launching our report entitled The Architects of Network Disinformation, Behind the Scenes of Troll Accounts and Fake News Production in the Philippines. This report is a product of the Newton Tech for Dev Network, funded by the British Council. The Newton Tech for Dev Network is a global consortium of scholars working on digital media in the developing world. Several of our network members are in physical attendance in your event today, including Cheryl Soriano, Clarissa David, and Sansan Lim. We invite you to visit our website, newtontechfordev.com, for a free download of our executive summary and the full 70-page report. So, our project is motivated by the question, which kinds of people sign up to become paid trolls? What are their personal motivations? Where do they come from? What are their social backgrounds? And how do they justify doing this kind of work to others, but ultimately themselves? In engaging with these questions, our aim is not to name and shame the paid trolls that we have met. Drawing from a production studies approach in media studies, our objective is to understand the broader system or environment that entices and incentivizes workers to slip into the digital underground. Our report is concerned with the vulnerabilities in the digital and creative industry, the mainstream media, and election campaign legislation that have enabled the normalization and even the professionalization of disinformation and fake news production. Our presentation is concerned with the architects of network disinformation, the diverse and loosely interconnected groups of hierarchized digital workers with varied social backgrounds and distinct work responsibilities. So in the course of our 12-month field research in Manila, we conducted 20 interviews with various political operators, from elite strategists masterminding election campaigns to low-level fake account operators on Facebook and Twitter. We also did online observation. Disinformation architects sometimes gave us unprecedented access to the digital underground, supplying us even with passwords to some of the fake accounts they used in disinformation campaigns, both in the lead up to and the aftermath of the 2016 Philippine elections. Here we should note that following the protocols of university research ethics, we told our informants that we would disidentify information that could be traced to individuals. So we're not doing a journalistic expose, but here we want to understand the operations of disinformation campaigns and the system that enables it. So what are our main findings? We argue that the problem of fake news and disinformation production goes much deeper than exceptional individual villains, because there is actually a professionalized but somewhat invisible system, what we call an architecture of disinformation. While the public's moral panics about fake news focus on notorious celebrity influencers such as Mocha Uson and their avid followers, derogatorily dubbed as troll armies, the real chief architects of disinformation hide in plain sight while sidestepping accountability. So, the chief architects of disinformation, we learned, were respectable faces as leaders in the ad and PR industry. Understanding this architecture means that we need to find brave and creative ways of challenging the system that has not only normalized political deception but made it financially rewarding. So first, the chief architects. Occupying the top level of the hierarchy, ad and PR executives play the role of high-level digital strategists. They hold leadership roles in boutique agencies, handling a portfolio of corporate brands while freelancing for political clients on the side. Motivated by the challenge of proving their clout in a new and political and professional arena, chief disinformation architects use professional tools of the trade to fulfill their political clients' needs. They have a track record for launching Facebook business pages and maintaining engaged online communities from household brands to telcos to celebrities, and their skills are for sale. To justify their work, these chief architects often express discourses of fictionalization as well as experimentation. For example, one architect said, "It's like being Olivia Pope of Scandal," to fictionalize the dangerous consequences of their actions and block feelings of real involvement. Sometimes they also express a certain thrill in breaking or rewriting the rules of the game. At the mid-level of the disinformation architecture are digital influencers, and there are two kinds. First are key opinion leaders. These are the high-profile influencers with a recognizable public persona, acting like celebrity endorsers, if you will, supporting politicians. You have key opinion leaders like Mocha Uson supporting Duterte, but also those from the other side critical of Duterte. Our research focused, however, on anonymous digital influencers. And these are the operators of anonymous accounts. If you can think about comedy pages, inspirational pages, snarky, humorous pages that you follow on Twitter and Facebook, they entertain their followers of between 50,000 to 2 million followers with a specific brand of hilarity or commentary, while occasionally slipping in paid content into their feed. These influencers harness their astute understanding of the public's pop culture tastes, their political sentiments, and social media behaviors to become expert attention hackers. They work part-time and per project alongside day jobs in IT, corporate marketing, or online community management. And they belong to the precarious aspirational middle class, taking on freelance digital work to achieve a certain kind of lifestyle. So, their justification is by expressing discourses of normalization. So, anonymous influencers say, "We do the exact same thing of encouraging our followers to retweet hashtags for soft drinks or new movie releases. What's the difference?" At the bottom of the hierarchy, community-level fake account operators do what we call script-based disinformation work, the grunt work. Fake accounts post pre-made content on schedule and actively like and share posts to meet a daily quota. More importantly, they create what we call illusions of engagement, a bandwagon effect that affirms and amplifies the key messages of a political campaign and encourage real, unpaid grassroots supporters and political fans to openly express their support for a politician. Most of the fake account operators we met were in it for financial rewards, freelancers paid on a daily basis for hitting their quota of social media activity.
Now that Jonathan has discussed the disinformation architects assembled by the ad and PR strategists, I want to discuss the process by which disinformation reaches the broader public. If you look at the infographic, you can see there's a dotted line separating the paid and voluntary supporters of disinformation campaigns. This denotes the porous boundary that separates the professional workers and grassroots intermediaries, like volunteers and fan club moderators. And in our report, we call this the disinformation interface. Here we can see the very close interaction between, on one hand, the disinformation architects who aim to generate momentum and energy for a campaign and to create illusions of engagement, and on the other hand, the unpaid grassroots intermediaries and real supporters who operate like political fans and amplify original campaign messages through shares and likes, even if they take them forward in their own ways. This leads us to our next point. Our report develops a model to understand the process in which disinformation campaigns move from the design stage to the implementation stage. And this model shows that the chief disinformation architects control the design stage. However, it also shows that their control is weakened at the implementation stage, as they distribute political marketing responsibilities to influencers, fake account operators, the grassroots intermediaries, and the general public. That's why we theorize that disinformation campaigns are characterized by this tension between two principles of promotional communication. One is controlled interactivity, or the maintenance of message discipline throughout the digital political campaign process. The other is volatile virality, or trading message discipline in digital media campaigns for the message popularity that these can attain, even with all its unpredictable social consequences. As regards the specific stages of network disinformation production, they are, as a chief disinformation architect put it, very much like what you have in an ad and PR communications plan, and it's divided into three stages. The first stage of campaign plan designing involves identifying key campaign objectives, crafting core campaign messages, and identifying audience touchpoints. The second stage of click army mobilization is about identifying the right social media accounts to use in a campaign. This entails creating brand bibles to construct bespoke Facebook fake accounts, but also tapping digital influencers' existing social media accounts that already have a large number of organic followers. The final stage is creative executions, which is when digital political operators translate and implement the campaign plan designs into social media posts that can weaponize the impassioned zeal of grassroots intermediaries and supporters. Here, influencers might use techniques such as trending and signal scrambling, as well as positive branding and digital black ops. What differentiates network disinformation production from a mainstream ad and PR campaign, however, is that it involves doing things that can have a pernicious effect on democratic politics. These include seeding revisionist history narratives, to silencing political opponents, to hijacking news media attention. Take, for example, trending and signal scrambling. In trending, the chief disinformation architects craft witty, memorable, and shareable campaign hashtags, and then ask the digital influencers to use their existing Twitter accounts to make these hashtags trend at a certain time and duration. For signal scrambling, the chief architects craft decoy hashtags that the digital influencers disseminate to confuse and divide the people who support an opposing campaign's hashtag. The purpose of these techniques is to hack attention in social media and then subsequently in mainstream media as well. There's also digital black ops, which is when digital influencers are asked to contribute to intensifying attacks on the personal branding of their political clients' opponents. For this, the influencers often use what Benjamin Moffat calls a populist political style. They might bring up divisive issues that push grassroots supporters towards expressing anger for those on the other side of the political divide. Or they themselves might adopt in civil communication, using things like Filipino snark, wit, humor, and indignation to fan people's toxic feelings. Understanding that fake news is the outcome of a professional and hierarchical work structure rooted in the promotional industries of ad and PR tells us that we need to be more creative and collaborative in addressing our current toxic climate of information pollution. While media and civil society initiatives to blacklist fake news websites, expose fake accounts, and fact check the divisive celebrity influencers may be well meaning, they don't really treat the underlying causes of the problem. It's an open industry secret that ad and PR executives take on political sideline jobs. How can their industry peers hold them accountable for the impact of their actions? The development of a self regulatory commission that requires disclosure of political consultancies is a good step towards encouraging the traceability and accountability of these digital campaigns within the ad and PR industry. We also want to propose regulation of the digital influencer industry, which is currently unregulated. There are no penalties for failing to disclose paid sponsorships. There are also new digital influencer agencies that have mushroomed in recent years whose objective is to maximize profits of digital influencers. We need to develop stricter industry self-regulating mechanisms that encourage transparency and accountability among high-profile and anonymous influencers whose feeds are for sale to the highest bidder. New national campaign finance legislation, what we call a Political Campaign Transparency Act, to finally get a clear picture of what politicians spend on digital campaigning, is also something that we strongly recommend. During elections, for example, politicians are required to disclose campaign spends on traditional media like TV and radio, but not for online and social media. The public has the right to know the quantity and quality of politicians' television and radio advertising materials, but also the viral videos, trending hashtags, and Facebook advertisements they purchase. We encourage journalists, civil society leaders, and academics to go beyond selectively shaming notorious influencers and exposing troll accounts while conferring hero status on others. Beyond high-profile targets, we need to collaborate towards solving the bigger problem at hand. Paid troll work is an offer that simply become too good to refuse. While addressing the top of the fake news production hierarchy, we also need to look out, very importantly, for the precarious creative workers who might sign up for this kind of morally questionable work by creating industry sanctions and safety nets that prevent them from slipping into the digital underground. That's it for our presentation. Again, Jonathan and I are only very sorry that we can't join you all in person today, but we very much look forward to hearing about the insights from your discussions and any questions you might have for us. Thank you so much once more to all the organizers and to the panelists and to the different participants as well.
Thank you very much, Jonathan and Jason. May I call on our panelists, Yoli Villanueva-Ong, former chair of Campaigns Group, Marian Pastor Roses, curator and culture advocate, and Maitel Ladrido, chair of the Department of Communication of Ateneo de Manila University. I'm sure you will have better questions than I do, so please keep those pieces of paper coming. I think we have until 11:10 or 11:15. I'd like to, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to respond first. Maybe you have like an opening statement or something. And I'd like to start with an academic. Ask her to respond to this as an academic product.
For one, I think the value of the research is that it makes visible something that previously was difficult to imagine. For example, we wondered how this information, where it began, and how it flowed through. All we knew was that it manifested through social networks. and we became vulnerable to them. But now, this exploratory project presents structure. No? This is where it begins, and this is how it flows through, and it helps identify points where of interface. No? So by giving us something to work with, something to visualize it with, and even to determine, that the people involved in it, they do have various motivations. No? It helps us understand this phenomenon better, so that in understanding it better, then we can engage it. So I think that, as a starting point, is the value of this project.
Thank you. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the 20 interviews they conducted consisted of 6 architects of network disinformation, 5 digital influencers, and 9 grassroots operators. I'd like to ask Yoli, a true advertising luminary in the Philippines. The advertising industry is on the spot here, advertising and PR.
Yes.
How would you respond as a practitioner?
I can approach this from several angles. But first of all, let me put it in actual experience, because it is no secret, for example, that I worked on Vice President Leni Robredo's campaign. Okay, the emergence of social media as a very important influencer in the media landscape only happened in 2013. In the 2010 elections, it had absolutely little influence and bearing on the actual results of the campaign. In 2013, certain candidates already saw the impact of social media and started their armies as early as 2013. And I'm saying this from post-study, because we do analyze what happens in a campaign afterwards, when hindsight is always clearer, as they say. So 2013, social media became more important. And then in 2016, it realized its full potential. And even then, in 2016, very few candidates actually had this kind of organizations behind them. And well, I don't know who the 20 interviewees were, but let me just say that it is not a secret again, because they have come out in media. 2 people professed to have headed the Duterte social media campaign, and that was Nick Gabonada, because he's proud of his handiwork, actually. So there is no shame in mentioning his name. Nick Gabonada, who was formerly in the sales of ABS-CBN, and Pompey Lavinia, who I think was in the academe, if I'm not mistaken. So both who took the credit for doing social media work were actually not in advertising and PR. Okay, let me just put that.
Yes, let's spread the blame. Yes.
No, it's not spreading the blame. I just want to be accurate, since we're about truth, and we don't want disinformation. So let me just put that accurately, right? So having said that, I do believe that a lot of ad and PR people moonlight and provide content. It is different. Content is different from strategy. So the word architect, if I am to be really accurate and strict about definition, does not apply to content providers. Because architect means you actually put the infrastructure behind this organization. That requires money. That requires actually a go signal from the campaign manager, who acts as the COO, in effect, of a political organization. So communications, which has never taken the front, I mean, in terms of importance, in previous campaigns, suddenly has become the most important weapon in the arsenal of a political machine. But having said that, again, the communications head, at least in so far as the 2016 elections was concerned, takes its orders from the campaign manager, who acts as the COO in a campaign, because, well, supposedly the candidate is the CEO. If I were to make a parallel with the private sector, so just so you understand. So the COO, or the campaign manager, is the one that creates the overall strategies, of course with inputs from the unit heads. Unit communications is just one unit in the entire machinery, and social media is just another unit under comms, just so you get the whole picture. So when you say architect, I think you're giving the industry too much credit, because normally it is for creative content that they are tapped. Now, having said all of that, does not diminish the blame. I am not apologizing for the industry, but I am saying that some of the recommendations which have to do with the industry will probably take a lot of time, because first and foremost, it's not for lack of wanting to do something about it, but because social media is really the wild, wild west, as we all know. So it might be hard for the regulatory body that was based on traditional media, print, radio, TV, to be able to monitor what's going on. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't start, and it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Thank you. I think we should follow up that lead, that we should perhaps also take time to find out who hired these architects, no? Who was contracting these architects, so to speak, to build a house of cards, a house based on disinformation.
Are you referring to the ad?
No, the ones who
Actually,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
no, we can get to that in a bit. I'm going to ask Maria now, as a leader in civil society. How do you respond to a study like this?
All right. I will start with a quibble, because, well, Yoli began it about the word architect. I agree with her. I have a couple of words that I don't think merit use of: anthropology, ethnography. Actually, are metaphors that may not actually apply, but that's a quibble, which I will get back to, because Father Jet reminded us of being careful about the power of words. So in the spirit of that carefulness, I'd like to do two things now. Go into the study and then move out. Going into the study, I actually have a list about 5 things which I believe extremely valuable for all of us, not just here, but in society in general. And the first is it really exposes and shows us the anatomy of the links between PR and advertising on one hand, campaigns, political campaigns on the other hand, and this entire infrastructure. It is, to use another metaphor, which I'm very careful to use, it's an ecosystem. All right. The clarity of the exposition is what I find valuable. And the showing up of PR and advertising as a player is new, that it is there. It's always been there, but it's never been in the line of sight of most people because its nature is to be invisible. The second thing that I find extremely valuable about the product is the slippery slope that it describes. The slippery slope where moral displacements happen. The points in which an individual or a group of individuals or the entire hierarchy begin to self-rationalize, justify behavior. The study goes into that in a big way and shows that as an individual, they can self-narrativize. They can create a narrative of self-empowerment by being a troll. And it justifies the behavior. This is valuable. The third thing, the moral displacement that becomes then possible because of the nature of the infrastructure, and I'm using that rather than architecture. The fact that these are project jobs, these are not jobs, which means that the actors up and down the hierarchy are actually allowed to go back to quote-unquote decent jobs. They're real jobs, they're real personalities, and this is something that they do because it's sideline. So it is possible for them to move in and out of personalities. And the moral displacement happens in that slippage zone. The fourth, I believe, is the normalization of lies. This, of course, is a huge area for thinking, but the general idea is that if you can sell shampoo by burnishing the truth a little bit, you can sell a political candidate by lying. It normalizes that kind of behavior. So the link, again, between PR and advertising and political campaigns and this new creature that we're looking at really deserves attention from that perspective alone, the normalization of lying. And fifth, we were talking earlier, there were really observations that seem minor, but I think are major. And it went by rather quickly as I read it. But the data that shows that a huge number of actors in this ecology are gay and transgender individuals is of deep interest, I think, to all of us because of the ability to code switch, to take on different hats and different personalities and to speak different languages and to be speedy about it and creative about it. All of us who have studied the languages of these subcultures, which have become establishment languages, and I certainly have a lot of glee in participating in these languages, and they are languages, patois and different kinds of ways of speaking. The speed and creativity is actually a major part of the content production. And this deserves our, actually, our congratulations. And I don't mean that in a specious way, and a certain amount of awe. All right, so I can stop there.
Yes, we'll get back to the zooming out a bit later. So I have 3 questions here. Please keep them coming. I don't think we ran out of white paper, so you don't need to write on tissue paper. But you know, we'll take all sorts. Maybe just a couple of questions first, directly about the study. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Pamela Combinido, who is part of the research team. She's with De La Salle University. I'll ask her to sit here also. One of the striking findings for me, at least, is its description of the way things go viral. So there is a combination. One is the strict script messaging, and then there's a new catchphrase that they coined. But there is also the element of volatile virality. So it's a combination of rigid script messaging, but which depends on a very human factor for the grassroots operators and the digital influencers to, as it were, bring their personalities into the script. So it's volatile because it may not always work, but when it works, people are responding to the human element in it. Anyone care to respond to that?
I think one of the descriptions in the report said that if you are too rigid, if you control the message too much, then it many times doesn't fly because people feel that it's not a spontaneous message and that they can figure out that this is strategic, manipulative. But when, for example, there are elements of spontaneity, and I think this is where the transgender code switching becomes quite effective, is that because they're so good at speaking popular language, that they can switch, into these modes of speaking, that the spontaneity of speech, that helps it go viral. That it is not controlled, at least it's seen as if it is not controlled, but it is a variation of the same message. That I thought was, again, a striking part of the report, that again, they're able to help us understand, oh, this is how it happens. This is how the virality happens. So there is two modes. One is that there is a very deliberate message being crafted, but that message can be told several times over in various ways that will capture the heart. No? It speaks to the experience of the targeted audience, and so they can relate to it, and that allows it to go viral. Again, I thought quite an ingenious way to describe why, because it helps me understand. Often when I'm reading these posts, I can't understand why people are responding to this, but apparently this kind of formulation helps me say, oh yes, okay, now I can get it, and I can see it, at work.
Yeah, really, one of the things that struck me was this whole idea of a script, yes, but a script for spontaneity, which I think is a new way of understanding this phenomenon. Pamela, maybe you can talk about, you have three different sets of motivations. The architects rationalize their work, to use their term. The architects rationalize their work in terms of experimentation and fictionalization. They are the Olivia Popes of the Philippines. On the other hand, you have digital influencers who are doing it for normalization. Everybody else does it. And then on the third level, they're doing it for the money and so on and so forth. Can you walk us through those three different motivations? I mean, what struck you when you were doing the research?
I think when we're doing the research, it was so important for us to identify that these people come from different backgrounds, and so they also have very complex motivations, and it's so important to unpack them. So I think that's so important to really highlight. So in terms of different motivations, I think it also reflects their class in terms of, for example, the anonymous influencers coming from precarious middle class who are also aspiring for financial stability. So I think that's so important to highlight. Yeah. And also to identify that it's also about job security for some of the anonymous low-level community operators. Yeah.
Maybe just one follow-up question based on something that Marianne said. These are project jobs, not jobs.
Yeah. So as we said, it's a
Even at the level of the grassroots operators.
Yes, it's a per project basis.
Yeah. Okay. So to get as many questions in, I'd like to just direct the questions to one panelist at a time. So this one is for Yoli. If the architects of this info are ad and PR pros, can you create an army of ad and PR pros who can execute campaigns to disrupt the ongoing disinfo campaigns?
In fact, that has been tried. And I've spoken to a lot of like-minded individuals who are so appalled at what is happening. And we have tried. But again, let me put this in perspective. Because in reality, they are projects, so they're temporary jobs. But they're actually ongoing and renewed every time. And in fact, there is a huge budget for it. There is, I think, 1.4 billion that was given. If you look at the GAA, you'll find 1.4 billion was given to COMS. That has never happened in previous administrations. So whereas it is project-based, it's probably renewed all the time. And in fact, I did my own interview. I met the 23-year-old guy who put together the network of the president. He was second in command, actually, and they do have a hierarchy even in terms of payment, right? Their salaries are according to their rank. So this guy was the one who went all over the country, created different provincial hubs, and then connected them later to work as one, organized, rigidly message or disciplined message groups, organizations, hubs. They were paid so much. This guy, anyway, because I don't know how much the drones are paid. But this guy made so much money, he quit school for a year. He was able to buy a car, and he was able to have cosmetic surgery. I mean, just to show you, just to give you an insight on how much money, and then he actually had a change of heart. He realized that this is not the way he wants to make his living.
Did you talk to him about motivation? Why did he do
Yes.
it in the first place?
In the beginning, he actually was a supporter of the president, and then obviously he had critical judgment. So at some point in time, he could not stomach what was being done, what was being said. So he jumped ship. And in fact, he told me with pride that he accepted a job from the other side at half the payment he was receiving from the incumbent. Let's put it that way. So, in fact,
Yeah.
some of them do have a change of heart somewhere
Yeah.
along.
So maybe the cosmetic surgery is part of creating a new identity.
Probably.
Leaving the past
but
behind.
To answer the original question, yes, we have tried. But again, we don't have resources. We cannot pay, so they're all volunteers. And when you have a group of volunteers, by the way, I am the biggest volunteer of all. If this happens, you can't hold on to them. They do it on their spare time, and you cannot have an organized anti-force for this kind of.
This question is building on the question for you and is directed to Marianne. So how can we stop, knowing what we know now, how can we stop this endless stream and cycle of network disinformation? So going beyond advertising and PR.
Stop is a very difficult word to use. We are actually living in another age. Under our feet, the world has changed. So I don't think it's a question of stopping. I think it's a question of understanding what's going on, understanding the infrastructure in which it goes on, finding out why code switching and personality switching moves in this direction rather than moving in another direction, because it can move into the creation of healthy environments. So not stop, understanding, and now let's see. Part of what I believe should be understood is the money, and Yoli has referred to it several times. If we all understand the money, we will understand what is going on. I don't know that there are too many Filipinos who understand the scale of the money. This kind of operation that was described cannot happen without obscene amounts of money. And we take it from there.
Can I add?
Yes, please.
I think also it points, when I was reflecting about the implications of this report, I was like, wow, it actually points out a really wide-scale systemic thing. And if it's systemic, it's actually quite difficult to address and stop. No? Because then you have to look at the different ends of the system and see. No? For one, it talks about our political culture, no? Where we actually market politicians, no? And brand them. And so this is why it is the ad and PR that are implicated in this, because they are so good at branding. So if we brand politicians, then this thing becomes lucrative, and this is where this thing begins, no? The money, the hierarchy. Second, it talks about also our political culture, where, again, no, we vote in this way, no? And that money really speaks. No? Our democratic structures work in this way. That money speaks, that you have to spend a lot of money to win a presidential race, to win a senatorial race. There are gradations of how much money you should spend if you're going to run for national office. And the one that has the money wins. So if we address it, again, it's part of the system. Media are implicated in it. So Brother Armin said this morning that it is looking also, it involves some soul searching on all of us. Because if you look at how systemic it is, we have to reflect about our participation in it as well.
Jan, may I just point out, I sit in the Board of Trustees of the Advertising Standards Council. This is the body that regulates the advertising industry. And they have been trying to include social media campaigns in their well, in the
In the
process
scope.
of in the scope, in the process of giving approvals for it. But this only happened, in fact, I left the industry in 2014. It only happened, they only started this 2015. That's how hard it is to be able to make, to really monitor what's going on in social media. And imagine that if there are, 53 million accounts, Facebook accounts, Maria, is that correct? About that many. If that is the case, can you imagine trying to monitor what is spent and what is advertised on FB alone? So it requires that Facebook themselves have to monitor or be part of it.
In fact, one of the 3 recommendations of the study is to regulate the advertising industry, and there's a corollary to regulate the digital influencers. How do you actualize that, Pamela? I mean, what?
I think it's also difficult to answer, though, the same that how Yoli also said, that it's difficult to regulate the digital marketing industry. So I think also it's a work in progress for us. I think we have a lot on our plates already, but I think it's so important to really recognize that this industry is flourishing now, especially the digital influencers, and we have to work with them and really understand their work in order to really make interventions at work.
How about like from the academia or from civil society? Is it even possible to regulate digital influencers?
I think this is part of being in a wild situation. We don't actually have our bearings yet. What we're trying to do desperately right now, as fast as possible, is to get our coordinates correct. But the problem is the coordinates are changing every minute. I'll ground this in what's happening right now, for example. You have the railroading of, in my view, federalism through a cha-cha, which we can see that the end game is perpetuation in power. All right, so that is a whole movement. But you can see right now in the last week that social media, the troll side, was actually not in this train yet. It's all political actors that are moving, the people in Congress and other people within the political sphere. So the joke around the social media circles is that wala pa yung memo, wala pa yung script from the top. So there's a lag of about a week. So what does this mean to us? It means that the beast is changing. It means that reckoning is being done right now. How do you move forward the political endgame or the political agenda, and how do you change what you're doing? So that is why the coordinates are very difficult to plot.
For our foreign friends in the audience, cha-cha refers to charter change, the attempt to change the constitution. It is also a kind of dance, but there's only one person dancing. This question is for Pamela. For anyone, do these architects and influencers actually believe what they were recruited for, or is it all just for the money?
Yeah, so surprisingly, most of our respondents actually align with their political clients. So I think it wasn't difficult to really translate the support to social media contents and messages. So yeah, most of our respondents are actually aligned with their political clients, and they really support them.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left. I promised Pamela the last 2 minutes to wrap up. But maybe very, very quickly, I can ask our 3 distinguished panelists to, for their parting words.
I found the recommendations quite valid, if not very, very challenging. The one that I will discuss in my last minute would be about the political advertising, if they should be regulated. The problem with the Advertising Standards Council is that they feel that they are not in a position to know whether the political ad is true or not. So they have actually refused to regulate political advertising.
Maybe they should start with the assumption that it's not.
So what we ought to do, and what I can do on a personal level, is to try and convince the ASC to put up a monitoring for political ads, number one. Number two, the spending, that is actually a very erroneous bill to begin with, law to begin with. The amounts that were being allowed were based on wrong information. When the law was passed and they said rate card and then 30% off, that is so wrong because nobody uses rate card except the network. Yeah. So in effect, the ad became astronomical, and that is not right. That is the reason why the poorer candidates can only hope for a miracle. And as I always say, the purer they are, the poorer they are. And that is actually an observation that has been true for the last century, I think, which is to your point, right? So again, those two items, I think, we can immediately act on. And I don't know about the law, repealing that law, amending that law, but that is key.
Yoli, I think you're addressing the right audience. I think if you need partners from different organizations, this is the group. So maybe you can just later on, meet some of them who might be interested in working with you. Marianne?
All right, two things. One has to do with the big picture, but the first one has to do with recommendations. I think if we're looking for a keystone, a piece of stone that we can pull out and perhaps something collapses, I think it's campaign financing. I think if we can be more transparent about what is being spent on campaigns even before elections, I think years before elections, if we can see that very clearly, how many billions are being spent, then we know the shape of things. And that's one area I think that we can put a bit of a focus on. In terms of the large picture, this study shows us the internal workings of one part, as Yoli showed us, one part of a campaign. It is not the whole of the campaign. And it's only one part of comms, which is bigger. All right, it is one part of political comms and campaign management. But the entire campaign of a political candidate and the entire atmosphere and ecosystem of disinformation is also part of the larger whole of a society. And in that society, the state is the main actor. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully people are the main actors. But a state has other means which are even more invisible than this. And I will put it on the table. Martial law, for instance, may look benign today in Mindanao, but the fact is an information vacuum has been created. We do not know what is happening in Mindanao. So the vacuum that is Mindanao right now is part of this information, is part of the state provisions, power, to create our reality. And that's only one other one.
Thank you. Just a quick note about campaign financing. I did ask James Jimenez of the Commission on Elections about this. And political campaigns can invest their entire budget in digital media. There are no restrictions. So I think it's 10 pesos per voter. So if you're running for senator, you're looking at maybe 50 million voters. So 500 million pesos. You can only run so many print ads. It's 1/4 page times. There's a certain frequency defined in the law. Only so many commercials. But there's nothing about social media. So you can spend the entire $500 million budget on digital media. Maitel?
I'm looking at the recommendations. I'd like to end with, how many of them actually point towards greater transparency, which I think in this case I feel particularly strong about, because often enough, what audiences perhaps don't see are how the flow of information works, campaign spend, no, and the flow of information, the entire campaign, if you will. No? Many times it's invisible to us. They become manifest only as jingles, no, as memes, no, and so forth. But overall, there really is a quite complex machinery that goes with these kinds of things. And while we have an understanding of how broadcasting, traditional media works, this is actually one enlightening thing that helps us see, no, that, yeah, this is, and it's a moving target. Likely in the next election, it's a different thing altogether, as Marian pointed out. Even just the preparations for the charter change argument, no, will likely happen on social media as well. And that this helps us see it, no, understand it, and that the recommendations move towards greater transparency so that it remains visible. It doesn't go back down and underground. No, they actually call it a digital underground. But yeah, that this doesn't go back down into that invisible landscape. No, at least now we can see it, we can engage it, we can address it. So that I think is where I'd like to end.
Thank you. Pamela, congratulations on being part of a landmark study that people are talking about already. Please have the last word.
Yeah. So hopefully, we really hope that our study really emphasize the broader the foundational logic and the broader architecture that makes this work very ordinary, possible, and professionalized and financially rewarding. I think part of the recommendation is really how do we support our creative workers for them not to slip into the digital underground. And also, we'd also like to remind everyone for us to be aware of our everyday complicity to trolling. So that's all.
Thank you. You can download the executive summary and the full report for free from newtonfortech.com.
And tweet your questions to Jonathan and Jace. So they would love to hear from your thoughts. Hi, John.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 11:20. There will be a 10-minute break.